Cyber News. Primera
First
pregunta.
question.
First of all, I would like to know if it's true that you are willing to up the threshold of the cut of the pension from $1,500 to $2,000. That's the first question.
I'm sorry, I did not understand the question.
Okay, yesterday, Senator Zaragoza said
Yes.
that in your reunion with legislators and the functionaries of the Fortaleza, you were willing to up the threshold of the cuts on the pension from $1,500 to $2,000.
Senator Zaragoza afterwards clarified his remarks. We had a working discussion with the legislative leadership, and we continue to have very effective, very productive discussions, but that's all there is.
O sea, there's no agreement about that.
There's no agreement.
Not at this time.
That's
We are in
because we're still
discussions,
just
and we
talking.
continue to have discussions.
Okay, the next question is, some of the spokespersons that are saying to vote against the fiscal plan, they're saying that they can do so because you, in other occasions, you've been willing to amend the plan and change the restrictions or the cuts for the pension, and you keeping putting more in all those amendments. So they think if they vote no again, they have another turn to negotiate and get a better benefit than the ones that they have now. So what will be the cost of voting no again this time, and if it's also true that you are willing to make another round of negotiations to get another fiscal plan?
So you are right. The board, over the past 4 years, has continuously improved the treatment of retirees under the plan. You're absolutely correct. I think the first proposal was a 1,000 threshold and a 20% reduction. We are today at a $1,500 threshold and only an 8.5% reduction. So you are correct. The board has consistently been looking for ways to make it better for retirees to the extent possible within the bankruptcy framework. However, let's be very clear. The deadline, this voting ends, and there is no other voting. There is a November 9 confirmation hearing set by Judge Swain in the Title III court. So in terms of timing, there will not be another round of, I do not expect that there would be another round, that there's time for another round of voting on anything before the November 9th confirmation hearing.
Sí, como menciona la señora Yaresco, estamos en un momento
as
crítico.
Ms. Jaresco is saying, we are at a critical point in this process, and Title III judge, she has given us a date of November 9th in order to present the confirmation plan, and the board throughout time has been committed not only with Puerto Ricans but also pensioners, and the treatment has improved for pensioners. At a given point, it was $1,000, up to $1,000, with a reduction of 20% atop that $1,000. And we have taken that reduction down to barely 8.5 to pensioners of more than $1,500. For 72% of pensioners who are the pensioners that received $1,500 or less, and important, all pensioners, 100% of the pensioners, have their first $1,500 guaranteed to them. Therefore, we believe that we are at a critical crossroads, and we want to demonstrate to Judge Swain that we can reach consensus with the administration, the House, the Senate, and bring forward an adjustment plan that will allow Puerto Rico to finally end bankruptcy.
Yes,
Primera hora.
when you were talking about the how surpluses would come back to help the government and so on, at some point you talk about EU and selling more rum. It sounded like drink more rum and help the government or something like that. Would you clarify, explain a little bit
No.
more about
Sure.
how that works?
I shouldn't have
please?
made the joke.
I'll
My
drink more rum.
apology. The government of Puerto Rico receives something called a rum cover over, an amount of money from the federal government on the basis of how much rum is Puerto Rican rum, how much rum is being drunk, how much rum is people are drinking on the mainland. So you receive more money if more people drink, if the volume of rum being consumed grows. And so all I was describing is that the fiscal plan projects the current volume of drinking rum, which is the current volume or the amount of money you receive from the U.S. Treasury for the rum cover over. But if for whatever reason the volume of rum on the mainland consumption would increase massively, then the revenues to the government of Puerto Rico would increase.
Sí, lo voy a traducir la respuesta.
I'm going to translate that response. As you know, the program Runs of Puerto Rico gives Hacienda a certain amount of funds based on the volume, on the sales volume of rums of Puerto Rico in the United States. We have a projection of how much that amounts to, which is received through Rums of Puerto Rico, the instrument, and our executive director explained that to you. It's the CVI, or contingent value instruments. What that means is that if the amount of monies that comes to us from the U.S. through the rum taxes, from that increase over what we have projected, part of that will be given to the bondholders. And then that's why the comment was made that if sales of rums of Puerto Rico increase in the United States, the amount of monies that comes to Treasury in Puerto Rico will increase. And if we have an overproduction, then we will come into the use of CVI.
I have two quick questions. First of all, I just want the board's, especially Ms. Jaresco's opinion about governor's remarks just recently about that even though if the pension cut gets through, he will pay the pensions. I just want a quick remark for that. And just to ask you, is there a possibility that the plan of adjustment does not include a pension cut? And the second question would be that you need legislation for the pension cut, for the CVI, and for the bond emission. What is the board's plan B if the legislature doesn't approve any of that?
Okay, very quickly. I didn't hear the governor's remarks, if you mean behind there, but assuming what he said is that he would, if there was a pension cut, restore it from the budget during the budget process. That's always been possible. In addition, as I said, the retirement committee negotiated with us the possibility to restore pensions. That's already in the plan of adjustment. So that's all very possible and realistic. Number two, no legislation is required to implement the pension cut. The only thing that is required from the legislature is to issue the bonds, which includes the CVIs, as you said, and the Social Security for teachers and judges. There's no pension cut in any legislation required.
Can I just add something to that? I appreciate that. And I obviously the governor's very passionate about pensions, but there's something that he's almost equally as passionate about, and that's passing these bonds so the bankruptcy's over, so he can get back, and the board's time can start ticking to go away. And he's showing a lot of leadership on that. And I think, as far as a secondary piece of being able to issue the bonds without the legislature, I mean, clearly we need the legislature to act here because these bonds, we want them to act. I mean, that's obviously what we want to do. They're the elected officials. They've got a role in this process, and we really need them to act. If they don't, there's going to be all sorts of issues going forward. So I think it's just important for them to be able to proceed forward, understand they have a role in the process, and I think ultimately that they will, because I think they'll understand the importance of issuing those bonds.
Johnny,
Just a minute.
sorry.
I would just say I'm very confident that we're going to get this done, and I don't want to speak for any elected officials, but I've been really encouraged in the meetings we've had. I think there's a common shared interest in ending bankruptcy. It's been a long time. It's time to do it. Everybody wants to see this chapter end. So You mentioned what's the plan B? I don't think we need a plan B because we're going to get this done.
That's right.
Johnny Isabel, Nuevo Día.
Buenas.
Ok, con mucho gusto.
Spanish,
Claro, con mucho gusto.
Spanish soundbite.
Ahora tengo que pensar en las preguntas.
Number one, the governor
Ok.
wants to pay the
Bueno,
budget.
número uno, ¿verdad? Yo creo que
Number one, I think it's really important to remember that the adjustment plan is the minimum that our pensioners are going to get if in the future, whether next year or in 2 years, the government has the resources to legislate for that difference to be paid, the 8.5, they have their resources over what the plan says. We're not going to oppose. But right now, based on the budget, the approved budget, based on the adjustment plan, and as Judge Gonzalez mentioned, it's greatly important for us to present an adjustment plan to the court that is balanced and that shows that we have taken into consideration the interests of all creditors. Therefore, when we created the proposal, we took into account pensioners. We've tried to ensure them the most coverage in their pensions. 72% of them would be guaranteed to receive 100% of their pensions up to $1,500 and a minimum reduction of 8.5 from then on. But if the resources are available and the governor and the legislator make a decision to use those additional resources, additionally to the ones budgeted, to take care of that difference, we agree on the fact that they can do it. The third question regarding legislation. Legislation does not require a pension cut. What we need is specific legislation to issue the bonds, specifically the CVI. And we also want to make sure for the well-being of our people to legislate so that our teachers and our judges have the social security that they so much deserve. All right, we're running short on time. Nodia.
I have a couple of questions. The first, I would like to get, or to know, and I would have liked to ask this question to President Skills, to Chairman Skills as well. What's your personal stance regarding pension cuts? What, Mr. Nixon, what, Antonio, Justin, what do you think about this? Because you're asking for the government to pass legislation to restructure the debt. However, it seems that the pension issue doesn't necessarily reflect an important amount of resources within the budget. Governor Pierluisi just said that this seems more an ideological issue rather than financials. So I would like to get some color on that.
Just very quickly, and I think Chairman Skill said it, I want this to be clear. It is not an ideological issue. We believe that there is a legal requirement for fair treatment. No one would, if we had choices, no one wants to cut pensions. We believe it has to do with the legal requirements in this Title III case for fair treatment.
I would say a couple of things. First of all, as Natalie pointed out, the legislation doesn't require anything with regard to a pension cut. The legislation only requires the bond. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the judge what happens. But personally, since you asked, I mean, I personally agree with the governor. I don't think this is an affordability issue. But that's just my own view. I'm one of 7. And again, this is something that's going to be decided by the judge. We don't need the legislature to weigh in on this. It's not part of the legislation. We only need the revenue bond. And, you know, I've said this a lot. You know, I want to get this done so that we can hasten the end of this chapter. I think Puerto Rico should be governed by its elected officials, by its governor, by its legislature. And these matters pertaining to pensions should be handled by them. Natalie said earlier in the meeting that there's nothing to prevent the legislature in years where there's outperformance from doing whatever they want. And my view is that we should be expediting and accelerating to the day when they are in charge and this chapter is over.
Yo he trabajado por el gobierno por como 20 años.
I've worked with the government for more than 20 years. And I know a lot of people who depend on their pensions, and I have lots of friends, I have family members who receive pensions. I don't have one, but I believe that the people who depend on an agreement they had with the government, I think it's important for the government to do things right and honor those agreements. But with a situation like the one we have, I think that
brought up a deal. I could break into Spanish. Sorry, I was trying to I think that it's important to realize that we've done everything we can to maximize the recovery for pensioners. I think that we all have a soft spot. You know, nosotros, we've got a soft spot for the pensioners and, you know, people who have worked their careers, you know, depending on these pensions. But I think at the end of the day, I think there is a legal requirement. There is the principle of fairness that we had to weigh and take into account. But I think you can see as the board's positioned over time, I think you can clearly see that we are sympathetic to pensioners and we have made significant movement. I really appreciate the governor's passion. If I were governor, I'd probably be fighting for all the pensioners as well. But as a board, we've got to look at everything in total, right? We've got to look at the pensioners against the GO holders, against unsecured creditors, against the, you know, all of the different classes that we're negotiating with. But I think as you can see where we've come down, I think you can see where our priority was as a board.
Sí. En español, voy a tratar de resumir un poco.
I'm going to try to summarize this a bit. Just as the question was addressed, I'd like to start in first person. From the moment I started working for this board, I've always said that my priority is to protect the pensioners. And to protect the pensioners means to ensure that their pensions are guaranteed. When we started this Promesa process, there was no money to cover pensions. And the only reason why the pensions have been able to be paid these last few years is because the debt wasn't being serviced, and that's how the pay-go system was created. Now, it's not an ideology matter. It's a matter of how it is we can present a plan that is acceptable before the court, whereas parity and equity is maintained. There are many types of bondholders, the GO, the COFINAs, the unsecured creditors, and some have received a 50% cut, and we're talking about the pension plan bonds. It's a cut of more than 80%. In the principle of equity that the court is demanding of us, we're trying to push and ensure we can give the largest possible payment to pensioners, but also maintaining the equity that the court is demanding. Once we are able to achieve exiting bankruptcy, Puerto Rico will once again return to economic stability and growth, and as we receive an increase in revenues, our legislators and our governor can restore the difference with the additional resources at hand. But at this time, the way in which this adjustment plan has been presented to the court, it is critical that we show the court that we do have equity within all the classes. we don't have
I would
enough
like
time,
to
so
know how
let's
many
go on.
ballots have been sent so far, how many ballots have been received. And I would like, if feasible, if you can explain the waterfall in terms of when, for example, pensioners are going to be receiving the benefits from an outperformance.
Sure. I cannot tell you. I think the ballots were sent, all of them. I cannot tell you how many have come back. I don't have that kind of data. In terms of the pension restoration, the way the agreement was reached with the Committee of Retirees is that if the surplus in any year exceeds what was projected in the fiscal plan by at least $100 million, 10% of that excess surplus gets allocated back to each and every retiree to start restoring their pension cut. Generally, but it's not exactly that way, so I wouldn't put it in those words. If you want to sit down, it's a longer conversation to go through the waterfall. But generally, the excess surplus, the excess as compared to the fiscal plan, okay, is shared, 10% of it is shared in the restoration of the pension cuts. It's not this excess surplus after the CVIs. As you described, the CVIs get paid, but the calculation happens simultaneously. It's not a waterfall as you described. I think the easiest way to say it is 10% of the excess surplus as compared to whatever's projected in the fiscal plan goes to restoring pensions, and just leave it at that.
Okay, let's move forward. I have Robert Slavin, phone buyer, on the line.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Please. Yes, we're here.
So I had a question at the start of it that Natalie Yerusko has responded to somewhat already, but maybe I could restate it.
Go ahead, please, Robert.
Yes.
What's the question?
So, unfortunately, there's this. I'm hearing myself. All right. So, there's negotiations going on right now between the local government and the board, primarily about pensions, possibly about other things that could possibly change the plan of adjustment. Now, if there was some sort of agreement to actually change the plan of adjustment, wouldn't there need to be a new vote on this? And how could that be accommodated? Now, Ms. Yerusko said, well, it could not be accommodated. Maybe that's simply the answer, but perhaps the answer might be that judge would be agreeable to move the date of the hearing. And I'd also like to know if there was a vote and there was adjustment to say the pensions, would only the pensioners be allowed to vote again, or would the bondholders also be re-voting?
So Robert, I'm not a lawyer, and I'll take all your questions and I'll get back to you, but I want to clarify just a couple things. I really want everyone to, we're having working level discussions on a wide variety of things that concern the elected leadership of this island. And some of it may or may not affect the plan of adjustment. Some of it may or may not require changes. It's all hypothetical. All the things you're describing are hypothetical, and then it requires me to assume a hypothetical outcome and then what the hypothetical outcome would mean for the other issues. And so I don't think there's not a great deal. I mean, I don't know what the outcome is, so I can't tell you what the result of that outcome is. I think we should just engage, fruitful discussions, try and be responsive to the concerns to the extent we can, and try and move forward.
Oscar Serrano, Noticel.
Yes, good morning, thank you. First of all, I came in mid-conference, so if my question has been covered, just let me know and I'll shut up and check the recording. But basically, the governor said no cuts for pensions. You have approved plan of adjustment with cuts for pensions. What's next? Where do we go from here?
So the next steps are happening in parallel. One, everyone is getting ballots to vote on the plan. Every class of creditors, every class of claimants, including retirees, are getting the ability to vote. Two, at the same time, we are having ongoing discussions with the elected leadership of this island about their concerns. Three, as you've seen, the governor has, in court, said that he supports the plan of adjustment with the exception of the pension cuts. So he is objecting to the pension cuts, which will then come through and I guess be dealt with by the judge in the confirmation hearings. At this point, we're all getting ready for those confirmation hearings, and probably the thing I missed, which is most important, we are very hopeful, and I think some of our members have expressed confidence, that the legislature will issue the necessary bonds. The legislation, will adopt the legislation to issue the necessary bonds and provide Social Security to teachers and judges. There is nothing in the legislation about pension cuts at all.
Kevin,
so to be sure, if I understood correctly, voting by the retirees, if they vote in favor of the plan, could do away with the governor's objections, and the courts could do away with the governor's objection. Is that it?
You'd have to ask the governor.
I think you have to ask the governor. I think his objections would probably stand no matter what happens. I think, his objection is his objection.
But as we said,
legally.
As we said, the governor is pretty passionate about getting this plan of adjustment filed and approved. He's also passionate about the legislature approving the bonds so it can happen. I mean, this is a fundamental step. I don't think anybody should overlook the importance of where we are in the process. The legislature and the governor need to act to issue these bonds for the PROMESA time clock to start. And I think that all of us want to turn back financial control to the elected officials. And I think that at the end of the day, everybody needs to understand the importance of the legislatures and the governor's role in that process. The governor gets it. He's showing a lot of leadership on this, and tying the pension thing to the debt issuance is something that we're obviously working through. We're having active dialogue, but at the end of the day, we just need to get those bonds passed and get them done.
Last question, Kevin Reorg.
Thanks. Does the plan or court schedule somehow call for a bond bill to be filed by the 30th of September and then passed by the 4th of October? Is that accurate?
No. That is, I think, what some in the legislature have hoped to do. But no, I don't. There's nothing in the plan of adjustment with that schedule that you just described that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you all.
Muchas gracias.